As you all know, my episodes always go live 2 or 3 weeks after I've written them up. This episode, Blackout Armageddon, was written at the end of April. I was outside in the patio in the vegetable garden. Only a couple of days later, as I lie in bed thinking about how to begin this episode, I realized that I couldn't remember just what I was doing in the garden when my mate came out into the patio and announced that there was a general blackout in all of Spain. I figure I was probably crouching near the new tomato plants and fixing the watering jugs there into the ground. Not something that required electricity, so without my mate's announcement, I probably wouldn't have realized that the lights were out until much later. This was around 12:35 on a sunny late April morning. The weather had been wonderful for several days, warm, agreeable, perhaps just a bit too much wind for my liking. I'd been able to be out in the garden almost every day. There was no bad weather, no alarmingly high or low temperatures, no warning, no meaning. The lights had just gone out. Way back in 2005, when we bought the house in the village, there were a couple of years when old-fashioned power lines would be blown down, and our village would be left in the dark. That was fixed about a decade ago with new power lines, but this seemed, according to the village WhatsApp account, to be on a much larger scale. We've had the village WhatsApp account since 2020, probably since March 13th of that year, the day we all found ourselves in lockdown to protect ourselves from a pandemic. The WhatsApp was set up by our mayor as a way for us to all be in contact and more or less informed about village things, like in the early days of the lockdown when they warned us all to close any street-facing windows because a tractor was going to drive through town spraying disinfectant onto the streets. Or a week later when we had a short-lived vegetable delivery service during that mandated confinement, so we'd not have to drive into town for shopping. Short-lived service because the local supermarket in the neighboring town complained about unfair competition. Since then, we turned to the village WhatsApp to get information on a very local level. Our mayor has access to other mayors who have access to local county government, provincial government. This past autumn, a neighbor announced on that WhatsApp that he had an excess of onions harvested and left big sacks of onions out for everyone to take from for free. None of us bought onions for almost 6 months thanks to that generosity. As village festivals approach, we get programming of events in that WhatsApp. And when someone's cat goes missing, well, that's included as well. So, before even checking the electric company website for downtime notifications, we turned to the village WhatsApp. There, the chain went something like, "I haven't got electricity in my house. Is something going on? In the neighboring village, there's no electricity either. I'm calling City Hall, but they aren't answering." That's our mayor calling the mayor of the neighboring village we are associated with. "The lights are out in different areas of Spain, and the larger city to the south, they don't have electricity. There's no lights, no water in the larger city to the north. National blackout. Thousands of clients with no electricity, so we'll have to wait. Here we are in 2000, when everything was going to collapse. Ha ha. Portugal and France are also without service. This is all pretty weird. Spain, Portugal, Germany, they say. What a disaster! All of Europe! What they're telling me, Germany also has no service, nor Italy, nor Portugal. Let's hope they fix this soon. Fill bottles with water. Water pumps won't work without electricity. In Portugal, they're talking about a cyberattack, and the TV says between 6 to 10 hours without service. You may wonder how someone can be watching the television for news when there's no electricity, but by the time that last message was sent, around 3 in the afternoon, some larger cities in the north began to recover service. In my village, no. We were without service from 12:35 until 6:43 that evening. Of course, now that the lights are out and you're trying to figure out what impact that event will have on you personally, you are also wanting to know just what has happened. We already know that there is no electricity anywhere in Spain, perhaps extending to our neighbor to the west, perhaps extending to the entire European continent. Is it really so extended? Is it a cyberattack? Are we expecting bombs and tanks? Let's check the news sources we can find on our cell phones. Nope, no useful information there. The data plans are not working all that well, but we can mainly see that there is no electricity. No one knows why. Chaos in the larger cities, traffic backups, people trapped in elevators, in subway trains, in long-distance trains, can't pay at the supermarket, hospitals and airports are running on generators. All the information is anecdotal, stuff that's going on because of the blackout. There is a growing feeling of angst as information that explains why we're in this blackout and how long we are going to be in this blackout doesn't come. I'd been listening to podcasts all morning as I tended to my tender tomato plants. My phone was down to 22% battery. Thanks Zeus, I had charged my extra external battery. Mate's phone was at about 80%. Have to conserve that battery life. There's no battery-powered radio in our house. I suggested we listen to the car radio to see if there was any information. Mate suggests that we wait so as not to wear down that battery. Plus, the gas tank was very low. Hadn't bought gas the last time we went to town. Then I remembered my old cell phone. It probably had a little bit of battery. I could try to tune into the FM radio on that phone. What FM radio, my mate asks. Why, the FM radio app that most cell phones have. The FM radio app that almost no one uses since no one listens to FM radio on their cell phones. The news on the national FM radio station was a bit more calming. It was only the Iberian Peninsula and a bit of the south of France where we have some casual connection with their electrical grid. The blackout was not generalized in all of Europe, so Germany and Italy were not without service. Just Spain, Portugal, and that small sliver of France. It was still a disaster, but not as frightening as we'd been led to believe from the stray comments left on the village WhatsApp. Still, more information would have been nice. Check the news on the phone again. The screen goes black. The message lets us know that telecommunications, which depend on electricity, be it from the grid, from a diesel generator, or a couple of batteries, well, it was also down. My home is 100% electric, so making lunch would be a challenge. Well, not so much so. We had leftovers from Sunday, roasted fish and veggies. I got a 2-burner camping stove, so we got that out. I changed the gas tube that had expired 15 years ago, the last time I used the thing, I think, for the new tube I'd purchased at the end of the winter, thinking about using that stove to make jam and blanch peas this summer. But we didn't feel like eating. That fish and vegetables from the day before that we'd thought of heating up, well, that ended up in the trash. After 6 hours in a fridge that had no spark, we didn't feel comfortable eating it. We had a beer and ate some corn chips with guacamole as we talked about the end of the world. I'm what is considered Feliciano. I guess happy-go-lucky. I found the entire event bothersome but not worthy of worry. My take on it all was that someone had overloaded the grid, someone like Amazon or Google, who have both built or are building those massive artificial intelligence energy hog server farms here and there in the Spanish landscape. We've got one, or will have one, I haven't kept up on its progress, just 15 kilometers from home. Overload the grid, the fuse blows, have to wait for someone to change that fuse. An electrical engineer on the radio says either there was an imbalance between consumption and production, or production and consumption. Not much to worry about, just be patient until they get it back up. The security systems worked as they should have. The mate was a little more concerned, but he's one of those be-ready personalities that would always have his subway ticket in his hand long before reaching the turnstile. He was ready for the lockdown in 2020 a couple of weeks before most people had considered it. He admitted to feeling a bit scared, anxious about this blackout. Of course, it could just be a grid overload, but it was the first time anything like this had ever happened in his lifetime. And the way things are going in this modern world, it's never a bad idea to be prepared for the worst. For now, we've no idea why the electrical grid failed in the peninsula. We have heard something about a two-pronged problem, one being the private and public producers and distributors of electrical energy playing with the production and distribution in a way that makes them a lot of money but puts an undue burden on the grid. Something about taking advantage of renewable energy sources instead of using traditional sources because renewable is cheaper, but they charge us the same. And the other prong is that distribution and warehousing technology for renewable energy is outdated or perhaps even non-existent. Whereas it seems there are rheostats on nuclear and hydroelectric and fossil-fueled energy production, the renewables just pump out the energy willy-nilly whenever there's enough sun or wind. And Spain is a leader in both solar and wind-generated energy. They simply haven't caught up with what to do with it once it's coursing down the high-tension lines. Or something like that. I always thought that the renewables were managed by first replacing the need to burn carbon-based dead things, or split atoms, then by charging up massive lithium battery banks. Guess I was wrong. That explains why they have to shut down the windmills that are sprinkled around my area, just because they might overload the grid. I can't imagine why that energy isn't being used instead of the other sources, or at least being stored in some fashion, or maybe I can. Of course, the bevy of bureaucrats who pretend to govern us are tossing turds at one another. The right is sure that the left is responsible. The left complains that the right is unjustly accusing them. The left is kind of in charge here right now, though they have to work with some very extreme left, while the right is beholden to some very concerning extreme right. You know, women in the kitchen or the delivery room only kind of right. White right. Nasty right. I just don't understand why the normal left and the normal right don't just meet in the center and ignore those extremes, but I'm not in politics, so that might just be a silly wish on my part. There have been some economic repercussions. Cows couldn't be milked on Monday and were still altered on Tuesday. That's a lot of milk lost. Meat packers had to toss out a bunch of cuts that were too many hours outside of the cold chain. Speaking of cold chain, an ice manufacturer had to toss out ice that was no longer ice. I'm supposing that they were throwing away the bags now full of water, but I'm not really sure what they did with that water that had once been ice. Were they able to use it again? Did it just go down the drain? Airlines and trains have had to be reasonable with missed flights and connections. Hotels and restaurants probably had to face cancellations that were assumed since no one could either call or even email to cancel. Ice cream shops sold their product to people on the streets for half price, since it was going to melt anyway. That last one was actually kind of a nice gesture, since it was a beautiful day, no one was able to work, a lot of people were stuck where they were. Why not enjoy the event with an ice cream? which was pretty much the tonic of the people. There was some panic, a bit of Karen attitude. In that town to the north of me, a guy became hysterical because he couldn't pay for his groceries because he didn't have any cash. Spain is a big debit card user country, so cash is passé. But in general, people took the whole thing with a grain of salt, unless the personal situation is grave, like if your oxygen pump runs out of battery and you die, or if you're sleeping on the floor in the train station because you can't get a room anywhere, or if you're on a train that is stopped in the middle of nowhere or in a tunnel, or if you're in a funicular somewhere in the mountains. Perhaps the most notable moment for me was 2 days after the event, but still nearly a month before you're listening to this, remember. There was a commentator on a TV political chat show who was saying something like, at least this wasn't like something like this happening in the United States where there'd be riots and looting and gunfire and the like. Oh, shut up, my fellow Americans. You actually deserve that meme. Especially right now. Well, we've survived another one. Not as bad as the pandemic, not as dramatic as 9/11, not as boring as whatever you all are going through a month from now. But there you have it. Thanks for listening. There are links where links belong. And remember to
listen, like, subscribe, and share.
Tell someone about this podcast. I'd sure like to see more people have a listen. I kind of feel like I'm talking to myself. No, I'm actually talking to myself. Oh well. Cheers. Announced on WhatsApp that he had an No, but by the time that last message was... No. Is it a cyber... No.
You're listening to Radio Rebel.